Charlie's folks sent me his bio and his intro, and I showed it to him. He goes, "Don't read any of it." So he said, "Just tell him I'm 27 years old," and he's 27 years old. And I've known Charlie since last December, and I will tell you, he is wise beyond his years.
That's right.
He is 27 going on 65 in wisdom. He's the founder and the president of Turning Point USA, over 450,000 part-time and full-time student members around the country. He's been on every television program, whether it's on the left or the right or whatever. He's been on there. He's a personal friend of President Trump's. He is. I will, and I know many of you listen to his podcasts and you follow him, and I'm seeing head shaking and all of that. So that's good, Charlie. And but what impresses me about Charlie is not only how much he loves this country, okay, and the wisdom that he has, okay. What impresses me and what I respect and what I love is that Charlie's foundation and his compass is what this country was founded on. And that is the bedrock of God the Father and Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior.
Yes.
And Charlie is unashamed to pronounce the name of Jesus in public. And he'll probably do it today, and that'll be okay. But anyway, I mean, if this is not an understatement, he is one of the leading voices
Yes.
in America in the conservative movement. He is going to be the leader of your children and your grandchildren if you raise them properly. Okay? But anyway, without any further ado, we want to give you a warm, air-conditioned welcome.
Thank you.
Charlie Kirk.
Great to see you. Thank you. Thank you, man. That was great. Thank you. Good. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm dressed down and a little bit late. Flew into H.W. Bush Airport. I should at least plan for 3.5 hours whenever I do that. So that's quite an experience. Great to see you, Dr. Scarborough. And I met this amazing team of what's happening here not too long ago, about a month ago. And in Albuquerque, New Mexico, after quite a week, we just had 5,000 students in Tampa, Florida for the largest ever gathering of young conservative students. And you know, we flew to Albuquerque after that to be with our friend Steve Smotherman. And he said, "I got someone you want to meet. You got to meet." I said, "Okay, great." And as soon as I heard the mission was to take over school boards, I said, "Let me know how I can help." This really is the foundational fight to save our republic. And you know, a lot of people are going to start to try and do something about this. This strategic plan that's happening here in Harris County is one of the best that I've ever had a chance to review and look at and see what can actually move the dial. And this is the world that I live in. For those of you that have been following us at Turning Point USA for a couple years, we've been doing this for 9 years, you know that we have been trying to warn people that there's a storm coming, that we are teaching our children to hate themselves, hate their country, believe there is no God. And I'm sorry to say that we are now living in the country that we kind of saw coming 7 years ago. But it's not too late to reverse that. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, "Charlie, do you think we are going to win?" Now that's one of my least favorite questions, but I'll tell you why later in the speech. But instead I said, I just think we've just started to fight. You see, if you really think about these sort of gatherings, this sort of strategic planning, with of course activists like Phyllis Schlafly and Jerry Falwell Sr. and others, there really was not the same sort of concerted effort that we see today 20 or 30 years ago. I make the argument that America refounded itself in the 1960s, and we are now living in 1960s America today. Joe Biden is a child of the 60s. John Kerry is a child of the 60s. Hillary Clinton is a child of the 60s, which is institutionalized rebellion, which is America's not a great place. Pleasure above all things. There is no God, and we are going to dominate other people in the pursuit of power. All these ideas were institutionalized in the 60s, and America was such a strong nation, it really took 60 years for us to realize that we have to take bold and dramatic action to change it. That's not to discount all of the amazing activists here that have been doing this for years, for 10 or 15 years, but I think you all agree there's a renewed sense of purpose in the air, that there are people that have never been political before that are all of a sudden saying, if we don't do something different, then all of a sudden we're going to lose everything that we once knew as the United States of America. And so I'm here in Houston for a couple days, first to kind of just support this great effort because the school board issue is the top of my list. I'll tell you about a school board project very similar to this one we're doing in Arizona, which we're having a lot of fun with. I just spoke at the Arizona school board meeting a couple days ago, and that was it. They don't like it when I show up. I'll tell you what. They moan and they groan and they say, "Oh boy!" But no, hey, I'm a taxpayer of Arizona. They got to let me up. And I encourage all of you, if you have not spoke at your school board meetings, flood the zone. I'm telling you, and I'll tell you why it's important in a second. There's a spiritual, psychological reason, because evil hates to be confronted. Evil hates to be confronted, and they'll always expose themselves when that happens. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. And I'm also speaking at a youth summit, I think, Saturday morning here. So I'm here for a couple days. But whether you realize, you guys probably actually realize it, you're living in battleground territory now in Harris County. The future of the country now is right here. It's probably top 10, maybe top 5 of most important counties in the country. I'd put Cobb County, Fulton County, Harris County, Denton County, Maricopa County as the 5 most important counties for the next 15 years. And there maybe Dallas County you could put in there, and again, that's not an exhaustive list, but definitely this county, top 10. This used to be a Republican stronghold. You remember that. This was the buckle of the Bible Belt. This was the place where you would be able to win elections as a Republican by 30 points and not even have to campaign, right? You just have to just say, I'm a Republican. Okay, you might as well be a Democrat in New York City, right? The primary is the real race. Now all of a sudden you're seeing at schools here in Houston teaching the most radical San Francisco imported radical woke ideology, and many of you are asking, how did this happen? And there's a lot of answers to that, but the short and easy answer is we were actually doing things that are usually more important than politics. We were raising families. We were building churches and building businesses, while the left, post-60s, their mandate post-60s was to continue the SDS, Students for a Democrat Society Revolution, into all the institutions. And colleges had a big role in this. If you follow kind of what we do, not exactly a fan of college, what it's become. I'm a fan of the idea of college, obviously, but I think, if you bring 22 million people every 4 years into systematic indoctrination factories, and then staff the Department of Justice, the IRS, the NSA, the CIA, the Department of Defense with those very same people over 30 years, yeah, it's going to make a big difference. Especially when those people believe that they're morally on the right side of every single issue, because they've been told that everything around them is racist, bigoted, homophobic, and colonialist, and you have to play your part to change the country around you. Wears you down after a while, doesn't it? Wow. But here's the cool news. As I mentioned kind of just previously, finally, we're starting to fight back. We are launching a counteroffensive, and it has the other side very nervous. This is why they spend more time at press conferences going after the unvaccinated and the people that go against the COVID mandates or go against the overreach of government than the Taliban. Because for Joe Biden's future, you're actually a bigger threat than what he wants to see the country become. He is much more worried about conservatives regaining political power, regaining school board positions, reactivating churches or strengthening churches, than he is the Taliban killing American Marines. For him, that's a rounding error. If all of a sudden 10 school boards flipped, that's a serious threat to the globalist types ambitions of Hillary Clinton and Valerie Jarrett and Barack Obama. You can list them all out. So what I'm seeing across the country, I'll just kind of mention a couple things. We can do some questions. Is that okay? Okay, cool. I am seeing this revived energy, which is great. I am seeing all of a sudden, I no longer have to convince you that we need action. Everyone agrees we need action, and people say, okay, so what do I do? And the best answer is the school boards. And we just launched our school board watch list, which is the first ever consolidated list where we have a couple full-time people where they're just monitoring all these school boards, what they're passing, what they're doing. We want to be an assistance to all of you here. I think you've got already pretty good identified of where to go here. But I'll tell you, as soon as you put eyes on these school board members, they freak out. They have never been challenged before. So to kind of complete the story that I said earlier, I spoke at the Scottsdale Unified School District, of which we're doing a very similar thing that you're doing. We got 4 out of 5 of the clowns on that board already recalled. We're going to get them recalled in early December. The election will be in March. Recalls are tough, by the way, just so you know. In Arizona, you got to get 25% of the signatures and all this. Now, what you might say, what do they do to warrant it? Well, mask mandate against, sound familiar, right? In this state, it's happening all over. Mask mandate against state law. They put out a social emotional learning guideline to every student to ask the students, what do your parents talk about at home politically and religiously, to report back to the teachers? Yeah. Social emotional learning guideline. I'm sorry?
I'll guarantee that's happening here too.
Yeah. Doctor said, guarantee it's happening here too. I bet it is. We exposed it, and so parents are upset. The funniest part of the whole thing, though, is after the 42nd person we put up there, out of 600 parents that we mobilized, right? one of the school board members was caught on a hot mic saying something that no human being should say. And now he's mired in scandal because of this expletive, one of the worst things that someone could say. You guys could look it up online. And all of a sudden now he's in this national scandal because after the 42nd person berating them to their face, they do not have one of the fruits of the Spirit, which is self-control. They do not have it. So eventually they will reveal themselves. Be relentless, everybody. It's time for us, and I know this is provocative thinking for some conservatives, to study Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals and use the rules that can best apply for us to save the nation. One of the rules for radicals, rule number 8, keep the pressure on. We have not done this the last 40 years. If we're honest, we do the opposite. We win and then we retreat. We're like, okay, we'll do this again in a couple years, right? No, now it's time for us not just to win these school board positions, but us to implement pro-American reforms, for us to make sure that the next election you win by even more. And this is the sort of offensive strategy that I'm finally starting to see conservatives embrace across the country. As I mentioned, kind of our ethos at Turning Point USA is that we play offense with a sense of urgency to win the American culture war. And we're here to help this amazing organization in any way we possibly can. And what just started as just an idea that I had instead of going to college has now grown into a juggernaut of thousands of chapters across the country, over 150 full-time paid staff, reaching millions of people online every single day, and really is, in my opinion, one of the few organizations over the last decade that has been able to stay. We started with very little, and we've been able to make a sizable impact and difference. And someone asked me, they said, Charlie, what does success look like for you? Because in business, if you can't measure success, then what are you really doing here? I think this is one of the big pitfalls of nonprofits. So our big picture success that every one of our employees can repeat is this: I want more people in my generation to love America than hate America. That's currently not the case. We are 20 points behind. 20% more of my generation hates America by public polling, believes it's racist, bigoted, homophobic, colonialistic, whatever, than actually has gratitude for America. And that segues to the one word that I always want us to try to embody and communicate to other people. We need to have gratitude that we live in this country. The Bible tells us that gratitude is the fruit that makes all other fruit sweet. If you have gratitude, all of a sudden you're less likely to be a revolutionary. You have gratitude, you're less likely to teach these radical ideas. The movement of the American left is a movement of ingratitude. And we have a position to reclaim that moral high ground. The moral high ground has always been them biting the hand that relentlessly feeds them, right? Didn't you know, Mom and Dad, you're both a bunch of racists? You're like, really, I'm paying for you to go to UT Austin and tell me that I'm racist? Like, I'm paying you to go to A&M to tell me that I'm a racist? And I know that this is heresy in certain circles. Yes, both A&M and UT Austin have become liberal wastelands, okay? A&M is more conservative than UT Austin, no doubt, but I could tell you story after story after story. And I am going to be speaking on October 15th, no, that's not right, 13th at Baylor University. So I'm split in the middle. I'm going to Waco. I'm like, not College Station, not Austin, but we're going to have a big crowd there. But I could tell you right now that our biggest problem is not that students are opposed to our ideas, it's that they've never been properly exposed to them at all in the first place. That they think they know what a conservative is, they think they know why we believe what we believe, but because of relentless 6, 7, 8, 9-year indoctrination strategies, they believe that the greatest threat to human existence is climate change. The greatest threat to human existence is systemic racism. You'd be amazed at how over 90 minutes or 120 minutes of even being exposed to some of our content and speeches, some of that can all of a sudden start to unravel. Why? Because our belief system is built on the natural law. We are anchored by reality, the laws of nature, and nature is God. We don't have to take 8 years to all of a sudden explain why we believe what we believe. It's very simple. God created man and God created woman. We don't have to overly explain that there's man is a man and a woman is woman. That's how I explain it to the transgender people, and they're like, oh my goodness, what? I say, it's very simple. You are how God created you. They say, what if I want to be a dolphin some days? It looks very fun. It's completely irrelevant to what you are. And so the natural law is always what should guide our politics. And guess what? A majority of Americans agree with us. The problem, and I'll close with this and we'll do some questions, is that most Americans are afraid to say these things because their new strategy, that is why they have current political control over all these places, is that they are willing to mock you, ridicule you, and destroy your life. They do not have better ideas. They are willing, I want you to pray on that word willing, to destroy your life personally, fire you from your jobs, kick you out of the fraternities, and they personalize politics in a brutal way. I am not saying we have to get down in the gutter and do that. I'm just saying let's just start to even go through the motions of fighting back against that. Whenever someone comes under cancellation, we should support them and say, you know what, we're not going to do that. The way it used to work when someone did an off-color joke at work is instead of losing their job, they'd be disciplined and reprimanded and counseled and prayed for and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. Now your life is over if you get exposed as a Trump supporter, as a conservative. The other mission that we have at Turning Point USA is to create a generation of people that are the same people in public that they are in private. That saves the nation. As soon as you no longer have to pretend you're somebody else when you walk outside the door, all of these cultural trends start to autocorrect. We complain about censorship all the time. I could give a 30-minute speech, an hour-and-a-half speech on Josh Hawley and why he's terrific, why I need to break up all these tech companies. The biggest censor in America is not Google, Facebook, or Twitter, it's you. It's us shutting up ourselves because we're afraid of losing friends, because we're afraid, maybe all of you guys are outspoken and you tell all your employees how great, the country is, and maybe I'm wrong. But I know generally we are all, myself included, censoring ourselves because we don't even want to have to deal with the hassle or the backlash. That's where they got us. We have to reverse pin them. As soon as they realize there's not a cost anymore, that they no longer can penalize us, that we are immune to whatever check and balance they put in place, they lose 95% of their political power. I'm telling you, it is the only weapon they have that has kept them in control. I'll prove it to you. Why is it they're able to implement CRT in a lot of these school districts? It's because anyone who speaks out is afraid of being called a racist. It's the most powerful political weapon in America right now. It's a paralytic. It's a conversation stopper. In fact, we overcompensate to such a degree, we have to prove that we're not racist. Instead, don't care what they call you. They're going to say it anyway. And guess what? They're going to call black conservatives racist as well. Just look at Larry Elder. Front page of the LA Times this weekend. Larry Elder, black face on a white supremacist body. Kid you not. So at this point, if they're going to use something that is a legitimate sin and something that is out there so cheap and so generously, don't let it get to you. Instead, push forward with courage and with clarity. And I'm telling you, almost all of the potency of their political movement disappears almost overnight. And that's what I want to just encourage you and say how you guys can continue to fight back and push back. Okay, let's do some questions, if that's okay. Yes?
I have a question. I listened to your podcast.
Thank you so much.
You're such a fine young man. I'd like to know what you've read and what you've studied, because you can quote Aristotle.
Yes.
I've heard you talk so many times, and you pull all of that knowledge out. And I'd love to know how you got that way.
Well, you're very kind. The key to my success is not going to college. And so I'm half kidding, by the way, half. I will say that most colleges don't teach any of that. So I'm very blessed to have great mentors that told me early on that what you take time for will end up being the person you want to be a year from then or 5 years from then. So every day I take at least an hour and a half of 2 hours, phone in airplane mode, and just read great books, listen to people that are far smarter and wiser than I am, and take more notes than anyone could ever take. I'm talking thousands of pages of notes, every couple months. We have a whole notebook at my house. My wife and I have just notebooks that I've filled. And then just reading the great books, reading Aristotle's Ethics, reading Aristotle's Metaphysics, reading Aristotle's Politics, reading Plato's Republic, and having the proper teachers at times to be able to guide you through those things, which of course the one college that I say is good, but they don't have enough slots for all your kids, even in this room, is Hillsdale College. They do a phenomenal job, and we're partnered with them with some things we're doing on our podcast and our program. But I learned early on that I need to take learning seriously. And so I need to know my Rousseau from my Hobbes from my Locke. I need to know my Aquinas from my Augustine. I need to know my Machiavelli, right, from my Hume, and understand at least the general ideas they presented to the world, because our world is a creation of kind of all these different good and bad ideas being thrown into a chopped salad, and now we're eating that meal. We need to know where that came from, right? We need to know kind of how it impacts our own personal behavior. And so I appreciate that compliment very much. And yeah, we just take it very seriously and take at least 2 hours a day to learn. And I encourage I encourage everyone to try to do that. So, yes?
My son just texted me. I told him I was going to see you. He's a big fan.
Thank you.
He's at USC. That's the University of Southern California.
Okay. That you fight on? Whew.
And he said, tell Charlie, we need him out here.
Yeah, that
He's finishing up there. But that's
Good.
not my question to you. My question to you is amazing life, what you've done, what you're doing. God inspired you. We haven't heard how He inspired you. I'd love for you to tell this group that moment that took you down this path.
Yeah, it wasn't as much of like a road to Damascus moment, but I will walk you through it. So I gave my life to Christ in 5th grade, Christian Heritage Academy, a school that was founded by Wayne Grudem. Many of you probably know about Wayne. He's phenomenal. Great Bible teaching, and I understood it. I understood what the Scripture said. I understood my broken nature. 5th grade, you're about old enough to be able to kind of make that decision, and every year from there, my own personal walk with Christ has deepened and sweetened, and I'm sure a lot of you can sympathize and understand that, or at least that resonates with you. I will say kind of the moment where the Lord decided to move through the Spirit, in my own personal opinion, is when He started to throw mentors at me without me realizing that were telling me. One in particular, a man named Bill Montgomery, who passed away last summer, he came up to me after I spoke at a Tea Party event. I was 18 years old, and I had just got rejected from West Point, and he said, you should not go to college, and that you should go pursue whatever vision you have, because you keep on saying, we need to, you should go do that. And now understand, in my local neighborhood, the drug addicts, the alcoholics, and the teen pregnancies are treated far better than kids that don't go to college, right? You do not like skip college, right? That is what the lowlifes do. And so it was a very difficult thing. I could have told my parents I was addicted to, cocaine. I'm kidding. They were very understanding. But in the local community, like, no way. That is a no-fly zone. Because upper middle class WASPy culture is built on the idea that I need to be able to, brag about where my kid goes to school. Who cares if it's going to make them hate the country and not love the Lord, right? And so, but having the mentors be able to pour into me was incredible. And I really, as soon as God opened up door after door, I'll tell you another story about a man who also passed away recently. A lot of good people passed away this last year. Foster Freeze. Many of you know Foster and knew of Foster. I read about Foster on a news clipping. He was one of the top Republican donors, and I ran into him at the Republican National Convention. Long, funny story of how that led up to. He was wearing a cowboy hat. Turning Point had like no money in our bank account at all. Introduced myself, and he said, my name's Foster Freeze. Here's how you remember my name. Foster's Beer with a thing of fries and add an S. He ran the Brandywine Fund, made over $800 million, gave away $600 million of it, by the way, while he was alive. An extraordinary life. Wrote us our first $10,000 check and said, whatever you need, you can always come back. I believe in you. Saw the picture and the vision right there. That's the Lord. And then he ended up being one of our biggest donors, contributing millions of dollars throughout the years. And so, and then I will say another turning point, if you will, for me, is when I met my now pastor, Rob McCoy, who officiated the wedding between my wife and I met him in the fall of 2019. Now, mind you, my belief of what a pastor was you never do politics. I grew up in a Bible-believing church outside of Illinois, not Willow Creek, Harvest Bible Chapel, which unfortunately kind of fell apart in recent years, but it was great expositional teaching, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, the way it should be taught. I believe, though, that there was a blind spot that I now look back where any time politics came up, Romans 13 was brought up, and it was a discussion ender. We don't do politics in this church. We don't bring it up. Pastors should never talk on these issues. That's it. I don't believe that's the correct reading of Romans 13. I'm happy to get into that, especially when it comes in the Constitutional Republic framework, and the good doctor can walk you through that even better than I can. But the reason I bring up that story is the first 7 years of Turning Point USA, I was told to separate my faith from what I was doing in the civic and political and governmental arena. I look back, that was the enemy trying to do that. I was always hiding my faith. I was afraid to talk about what I believed in and how it intersected that. So I met Pastor Rob McCoy, who was the first pastor I ever met who was speaking out clearly and confidently. You met Rob out in Albuquerque. He was mayor of his city as a pastor. I'd never met anyone quite like him. And he said to me, he said, Charlie, you don't understand. Your Christian faith and what you're trying to do at Turning Point are the same thing, trying to save God's idea of liberty because it's not man's idea. Never heard that before. Started the friendship, which now where we are today, we're attempting to do a pastor outreach program, many other things in many other states, and that was a real turning point for me. And just getting into the Word every day, and being able to understand kind of God's purpose and His plan for me has been really, really moving. So, questions? Yes.
A couple of things. I'd forgotten. I guess I met Rick Scarborough 25 years ago with Tom DeLay, and I'd forgotten what a gift he is. Maybe it's just an extraordinary person. And I also would like Rick to remember Tom DeLay for us in a little bit. Your friend Hanley Sayers has 4 or 5 children at a church school that is going through a lot of trauma. And we need to save the public schools, but we have an organization called the National Association of Independent Schools that puts its stain on all of the private schools, including church schools, a lot of church schools. They do training programs for teachers and administrators to teach them LGBTQ themes starting in kindergarten, critical race theory, white privilege, yellow privilege,
Yes.
cultural bias. So that's another organization that could use some of your attention.
NIAS, or yeah. And I've heard of it before. I'm not sure how effective we'll be at reforming that. Can I just comment on that? What's been really stunning is how corrupt these private schools have become. Starting to see parents care more, but there is kind of a social currency aspect where deep down parents want their kids to go to Harvard. They don't want their kids to become plumbers. And they're willing to have their kids get indoctrinated because deep down, upper middle class parents, they dread having to turn to their family members and their friends saying that my son's working construction. They'd rather say their kid is an atheist liberal studying microbiology in Cambridge than ever having to say that their kid would be like the unwashed working construction. That's why this has happened, perfectly honest. I think it's changing finally, but don't discount how the social caste system and the ruling classes, kind of intention to want to preserve their own plays into this. I think that's finally changing, thankfully. Though.
So I got a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you got
This
it.
is a question I was waiting for somebody to ask, and I figured I better ask.
This will be the last one. Yeah.
So if all the universities are giving the wrong indoctrination, are there any universities that we can sort of say they're not quite as bad as the others? Maybe we can help some of these universities get back on track, like Liberty?
Yeah, I got about 10 or 12 in the whole country. Hillsdale's great, Liberty's great. There's a couple here in Texas, but they've kind of taken turns, honestly. Baylor has gone so woke, it's unbelievable. It used to be a respectable school. High Point's okay. Yeah, I got some new information there that's a little questionable, but I'm sorry?
Houston Baptist.
Yes, I'm sure they're going to hold the line. They'll be the last one ever to go woke. I will say a lot of the religious Baptist schools. I think University of Dallas is still extraordinary, I've been told. Oh no, not at gunpoint send your kid there. Oh my goodness. Unless you, and I'm going to say something provocative, I'm sorry. If you send these kids to school, just be willing to play Russian roulette with their values. Some survive, some die. And so it's just you have to bake that into the equation, right? So I'm sorry, yes.
Can I ask just one
Yeah.
question?
I'm sorry, acting like it's my event. So.
Listen, you travel all over and you meet with congressmen and congresswomen.
Yes.
Are you encouraged by the conservative movement? I know there's been so much frustration by the Republican Party and the rhinos. There's very few that I see that are willing to really stand up on conviction and courage and speak publicly. Like, where are we?
Yeah, so just to repeat the question, am I encouraged by the Republican Party and office holders? Absolutely not. I'm encouraged by you. I'm encouraged by the voters. We got a lot of people we got to remove. We just did a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package while our president literally is betraying our troops in Kabul. The fact they're even picking up the phone and negotiating with this guy, it's so unbelievably frustrating with all the other things that we're doing. The southern border's wide open and all this. So look, I'm encouraged by the people though. These politicians, they all got an expiration date. We're going to replace a lot of them, and it's going to be wonderful. I could tell you that Senator Ted Cruz is doing wonderful. Yeah, he is. He is doing wonderful. He's one of the few good ones. I mean that sincerely. And again, I always say this. People are like, what about this person? It's not an exhaustive list. Same with the colleges. I could always go with that. But you guys, for those of you that give money to politicians, when they call you relentlessly, because they do, You have no idea how impactful donors are chewing out these congressmen. They take their orders from you. And enough being like impressed because a congressman's calling you. You got to be like, you're kind of worthless, honestly. Like, why? What are you doing? If they demand it, they take orders from you guys. Trust me. They more than constituents yelling at them. When donors get mad at them, it ruins their whole week. No, it does. Seriously, they take orders from the donor class. The current structure in America is donors call the shots. And so the fact that you guys are all here tonight in a position to support this great effort, when you get those calls, challenge them. Ask them about that. I just want to encourage you guys to do that. So in closing, support this effort, everybody. We're going to help any way we can. I've been so moved by the importance of this. Local, local, local is the way we are going to save this country. I will come back here before the November elections. If I can help in any way, I don't know if I'm going to be a help, to be perfectly honest. You might want to keep me far away from these candidates. I totally understand that because it's got to be nonpartisan in nature. But please do what you guys can. This is how we're going to save the country. God bless you guys. Thank you. So, is that okay?
Yes, yes.